Let's jump in.
Sounds good.
I am really thrilled to be able to conduct this conversation with you. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I want to thank if you are watching this ex post facto in the recorded format. Thanks for watching. It's really special and nice to be here with Liza, the CEO of Instant Team. So why don't I start with just having you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Liza Rodewald. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Instant Teams. I live right outside of Fort Liberty, which used to be Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My husband is still active duty, so we are still stationed around here. And I have 4 kids, 2 dogs, and I'm happy to be here today.
And you are here today because you may be our favorite CEO. We can't tell that to anybody. But you run a pretty amazing company. So why don't we start very briefly on what your company does?
Sure. So Instant Teams is a talent marketplace that connects companies with military spouse talent in the customer experience kind of roles for remote teams, remote employment, career development. And our mission is to help improve the financial well-being of military families.
And we I think what's really interesting about how you got there, which is really what I want to start by probing into a little bit here. Um, Before I ask you how you and Erica founded the company, I would love for you to share with us, get a little more personal, and share with us your journey. We'll get to your journey of being an entrepreneur, but there's a great there's a great guy. I think it's pronounced Ween, Byron Ween. He's the vice chairman of Blackstone, and he when he turned 80, or he wasn't one, but when he turned 80, he wrote a list of 20 things that he learned in his first 80 years. And one of the things that he said was most people have he basically said people have fundamental things that occur in their lives before they're 17 that shape who they are as a person. It's another, simplify, put simply, your childhood affects who you are. Tell us how you grew up, where you grew up, and give us one interesting thing from your childhood that shaped who you are today.
Okay. Well, I grew up mostly in Missouri, so I have an interesting accent. When people hear me talk, they're trying to figure out where I'm from. It's sort of a little bit of South, a little bit of Texas, a little bit of Midwest, all kind of mixed into one. But for most of my childhood, I grew up in Missouri on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, actually at the very end of a gravel road. My dad's dream was to go build a house on his grandfather's land. And so he did that. And that's where I grew up and spent most of my early days, very hardworking kind of parents. And I had a dad that used to sing me songs, and he used to say, sing the song. It was called Liza Marie, what do you think you're going to be? And he would say, maybe a doctor, maybe a lawyer, and he'd put things in it. So I think from an early age, they implanted that kind of dreaming big and doing big things, and really encouraged. I came from a family of all girls. There's 3 of us, 2 entrepreneurs and 1 engineer came out of that family. And I think that dynamic really helped shape just my thinking on what I could accomplish, and kind of bled into how I started my career in technology.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about that career? So, yeah, walk us through your transition from high school to let's get to pre-instant teams. Let's cover the
Right.
professional pre-instant teams.
Yeah, I actually told this story at Grace Hopper because I spoke there a few weeks back, and it ties nice, I think, into my entrepreneurial story. So I actually went to college on a music scholarship, and studied music for a while, but I knew I didn't want to like be in music education, and I was kind of looking for my path there. Took a couple of computer classes and fell in love with the idea of creating solutions. It seemed very like artistic to me, from an engineering standpoint, to create things on the screen and have it solve problems. And I fell in love with that side of computer science, switched my major then and got my degree in there. And I actually landed my first job while I was still in college. So I responded to a job ad for a full-time engineer with like 5 to 10 years of experience in .NET technology, which was what I was learning in college. And so I applied to that job and I said, I do not have all of these qualifications, but I can do this. I know the database side. I know the front end side. I can jump in. I can learn. I can be a good employee for you. And they actually hired me from me pitching myself there. So I got my first job at what was a startup at the time, but I didn't really realize that's what they were called then. There were only like 12 people there. And I was the only woman that worked for the company. So I was the first female engineer that they had in that team. And what I loved about that experience is I got to touch everything in that company. I got to work on the back end, the front end of the systems. I got to talk to the customers. I got to do the project management. I got to see how the company was ran. And I got a lot of really amazing experience working for them. And so after working there about 4 or 5 years, I decided I was going to start my own consulting company. And that's when I first kind of became an entrepreneur. So I started my own software consulting business about 4 years out of college and started creating businesses from that point forward.
And I think this is where the journey gets really fun. You then became a military spouse.
I did.
But not out of the gate, as we say.
Right.
And I'm sure that was an interesting experience for you. To take us through that the realizations that came from that new phase of your life.
Yeah. So right after my husband and I got married, he was in the reserves when we were dating. So he was active duty before, and then he was in the reserves. So right after we got married, he was like, hey, I think I want to go back active duty. And I really had no point of reference of what military life was like, but I ran a 100% remote company myself at the time in my software consulting. And so to me, I thought, well, all right, let's see what this is about. We'll go on an adventure. And we moved to Clarksville, Tennessee, because he did ROTC for a master's degree to get back in. So that was his path back to active duty. And when we moved into our first area that was mostly military connected, and I was working from home and building software, every single spouse would just say, hey, how are you working from home? Like, how are you maintaining a career, and how can you help me? And after hearing that over and over and over, literally everyone that I met would say those same words to me, I started realizing just what a big problem it was. And I had a non-traditional experience in that I came with a career already built that was completely portable with me. And so I began to get a passion for, okay, how can I help solve this problem, right? It's a huge problem. I know companies out there that I work with that would love to have access to this amazing talent, because all of my spouses that were around me were educated, they had great skill sets, and they were just sitting there. And so I'm like, okay, what can I do to help bring these kind of two things together and help solve it? So I just started mentoring one-on-one. I taught spouses how to like pitch remote work to their companies, started having coffee with them. And that, eventually bled into me meeting Erica and us kind of formulating the idea a little bit around a bigger business idea.
And we don't have Erica as a participant. I'm sure she's snooping on this call, but give us you have a pretty radically impressive and cool, amazing co-founder. Why don't you give us the quick sales pitch on Erica?
So Erica and I met when we both lived in Virginia at a very short period of time. And she was consulting for some companies out in Silicon Valley, and she was building user acquisition teams in the military spouse space. So we hit it off from a professional level pretty early on, but we actually met in an online fitness group. That's how we met, and then realized we were neighbors. We actually lived in the same neighborhood and connected for a little while there. But then, as typical military life takes you, we moved away from each other just a few months after that, but always stayed in contact from a professional angle. And then she came to me with an idea that she had, and then I shared an idea that I had, and we started kind of iterating on that. We knew kind of each other's strengths and weaknesses. At that point, I kind of took a lead on a tech side, and she took the lead on the community building side. And her and I, just got together and started iterating from that. But from a co-founder experience, like, you nailed it on the head. Like I could not have a better co-founder. She is amazing and very emotionally intelligent and connected and aware. And we've been able to have and build like a really solid relationship. A lot of people think we were best friends that started a business, but we weren't. We were kind of acquaintances that knew each other professionally and then realized that our skill sets would match well together to start a company.
Yeah, I tend to, it's funny because I tend to dislike most of the time the title co-founder. I think I have this personal perspective that it means nothing, and at its best, it sort of signifies, hey, this is what somebody did a long time ago, rather than what they're really bringing to the table today. I say that because the both of you define the opposite of that viewpoint. You are so collectively the heart and soul of this company that it's almost like irrelevant to what your titles would be in terms of the power that you both bring every day. And it's like, it's the one place where I'm proud to always talk about the two of you as it's the only time I use the title co-founder with pride is when I refer to you and Erica, because I just feel like it signifies so much. Let's talk a little bit about the genesis, and I want you to share with a little tidbit, a little breadcrumb here for people. The company was not originally called Instant Teams.
No.
Tell us, bring us back to the early days for a second of the forming of the company. What was it called? What was it called? Why was it named that? And how did you make the transition to Instant Teams?
Yeah. So our original name was Mad Skills. And it took us a while to come up with the brand idea. But the brand Mad Skills was really generated towards the military spouse community, having such amazing skill sets that were sitting there. And it was a brand I think the military spouses really got behind early on, in the early days of what we were doing. But what we kind of figured out as we started iterating and talking to customers, everyone on the customer side thought we were in the entertainment industry. And so it wasn't quite like it hit well in the spouse side, but the customer sides were kind of confused about what we were doing. And when I was actually building teams myself in the software company, I had the idea for Instant Teams, and I had bought the Instant Teams domain a long time ago when I had that idea. And so as Erica and I started iterating in it, I said, I think we can scale this company at a much larger pace. And I have this other idea and this name here. What do you think about transforming Mad Skills into Instant Teams? And we started talking and discussing and making a plan and moving it there to speak more to the customer side.
And the flip side of that conversation, though, I've always found it interesting. You have been hesitant, even though the company is so focused on military spouse talent. From the day I met the both of you, you were sensitive about that. You didn't want, to call it, it was the opposite of hireaspouse.com.
Right.
Tell us about why you were hesitant, and why, when even in the early days when we went to the Instant Teams website, we had a hard time even figuring out that, hey, this was military spouse talent at its core.
Right. Well, it's an interesting balance to figure out, but from the community that we serve, the military spouses we speak to and we're part of every day, they're really looking for their own identity, a sense of empowerment, a sense that they have something that's theirs, that's not necessarily the service members or connected to the service member directly, right? And so all of that branding that's very USA and very, it leans itself to like being part of the military, and the spouses really wanted their own identity. And so I know it was hard in the early days for a lot of, even some of our early investors wanted us to have red, white, and blue and wanted us to do all the things, but the community we serve is not what they want. Right. And so it's been tricky to figure out how to balance from the customer side, because this customer obviously wants to support the mission. They want great remarkable talent, but they also want to support the mission. So how do we bring that forward in the brand while still giving the spouse the sense of their own identity and their own empowerment, their own career development, which is what they're craving so much, because so much of their identity in the military life is wrapped up in the service member and their identity. So trying to separate those two and make sure we strike a good balance has been a core focus of ours, to make sure we actually serve the community we've set out to do.
I should be generally banned from going dynamic and coming up with analogies and stories in the middle of the period, but you know me. I'll tell you a quick story of my own as it pertains to, when I moved to Baltimore, and I was the CEO of Rodewald, and was recently married, and you've spent time with Raina, my wife, and I sort of joke today. I say, for a few years she was my wife. And in many ways, we'd go to a party and it was, oh, your guy's wife, because I was known as the CEO of the software company in downtown Baltimore. We sold the company. I went from somebody to nobody. I'm now unemployed. She launches a very successful women's clothing boutique in Baltimore, and I had sort of quietly formed Squadra. Sorry. I'd quietly formed Squadra, but I hadn't really, announced it to a lot of people, and I was still working from home. And I went out, and suddenly, she went from being my wife to I am now her husband, and so we walk into a room, and people would say to her, "Oh, you're Raina's husband," and I never forgot that, and we've talked about it a lot since, of how powerful that identity was for her, how impactful it was on our children. I'll tell you another one quick funny story. I think I've told you this, but my son had to come home and do a project, and this was in the early days of COVID. I was working at home. She's grinding and running the store. What do your parents do for a living? He writes, my mom's an entrepreneur and runs a clothing store. My dad's a typist, because I'm sitting on my computer typing all day, and so I've always
be humble.
I've just always deeply appreciated, though, how much you all have protected the brand, but protected the brand for your community. Mm-hmm. Sometimes frankly, at the cost of revenue. Now, I do want to touch on your realization this year, even at the board level, of the importance of social impact selling. Mm-hmm. Right. So tell us a little bit about, where is your head now on that topic? I mean, I feel like with you, the balance is shifting a little bit. You're starting to embrace it a bit more. Is that because what drives that? I won't put words into your mouth.
Yeah. So I think over time, we've been able to prove that we have a good business model and we can solve real business problems. And that's always been my take on building the company. Like, what is a business problem we can solve, and then give those opportunities to the military spouse community. And so with impact sourcing, it's a newer term that companies are using probably in the last 4 to 5 years, where they're talking about, okay, how do we source and solve our problems, but also make an impact on different underserved communities, right? And so that aligns perfectly with our mission, right? Because companies won't choose to source with someone who can't actually solve a business problem. But you also, if you can solve a business problem with a social impact, it's just a win-win. And so learning also some of the enterprise companies, some of the terms they're using in the space of things that we're creating, and marrying those two things together has been a powerful way for us to start to communicate what it is we do at Instant Teams on a day-to-day basis. And that impact sourcing is not only for the military community, but the diversity within the military spouses that we serve, which are 90% female, and 50% of them identify as people of color. So we have diversity within our diverse community, right? So using those things and leaning on them as strengths for the company, and why those equate to good customer experience roles, which is what we provide to the other companies. Tying those stories together has been really powerful to us, and a constant learning experience to learn how to leverage the words and leverage the opportunities. But we never wanted people to hire a spouse because they feel sorry for a spouse. Want to hire a spouse because they are an amazing employee. They have high retention, they have high degrees, they're educated, they have unique live experiences, like all of these things that make amazing people for your organization. That's always the message we wanted to make sure that stood out versus doing it just because it's a good thing to do. It's a good business thing to do for multiple reasons. And the impact sourcing is just another way for us to open those doors.
And I want to get into the specifics of, at the very end of the day, our core capability here is to deliver amazing people as remote workers to these companies at scale. And I want you to talk a little bit about very specifically why, I think the other side to that thought process is now the brand's actually not even from an impact perspective. It's also people are starting to say, wow, I actually want military spouses because when I've been able to bake them off against others at the same price point, especially, or similar price point, they overperform. Tell us stories about the overperformance, the retention, et cetera. Give us some specifics. Give us an example of a client where they have determined that your community outperforms other vendors.
Sure. Well, we just actually brought one of our customers on to our team and put them on Zoom and asked them some of these questions, because we have a customer that handles relocation for very big, large brands. And one of the things that, relocation back to the office has been sort of a slower business as of lately, as people have gone more to remote work, and they had to do some layoffs. But they have a sizable instant teams outsourced team. And every division manager that had what they call instant teamer on their team fought to keep the instant teams employee and actually put some of their internal people up for the layoffs so that our teams would be protected, because they were outperforming and doing so much better in those teams. So that was a testament to us that, they went to bat to keep an outsourced provider versus keeping their internal employees in that situation, because our teams were performing that well and our KPIs and our retention was so much higher than what they were seeing turnover within their own employee base.
And compared to other outsourced providers?
Well, compared to their internal team
what
members.
I'm saying is it's even more, it's an even more of a home run, right? When you broaden that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How long, if I'm a potential customer of Instant Teams, I'm a potential, how big of a job can we handle? And how long does it take? Tell us about the size of the community, our ability to leverage that community to fill positions. Give us a story about our ability to deploy at scale and with speed.
Sure. Well, we just did 75 in 2 weeks. So that was last month. We deployed a team of 75 to one of our customers in 2 weeks. So we scale fast. We can deploy very quickly. But part of that secret is we have an active community that we nurture along the way. So when these opportunities come, we're not starting from zero from a recruiting standpoint. We have a very warm audience through our 12 Million Plus app, through our career seekers portal that we have, the content that we continually create for the community, so that when we have these opportunities, we're able to pull from that really fast and scale those teams quickly.
And I want to come back to, I want to actually bring it back to the early days of our relationship. Do you remember? I remember the statistics, but what statistics do you remember about where you were when Squadra came into the equation?
Is this the 90% unemployment?
Well, that was gonna be a killer question, but just where was the company? We'll come back to that. Where was the company, if you remember?
Revenue? Or
revenue, employees, that kind of thing.
I think we had just hit like $100,000 a month in revenue, MRR, when we started talking. I'm not sure how many employees we had, but now we have 500, and we had way less, maybe 20, maybe less than 20 at the time. So, we met in the very, very early days where we were just starting to get some traction.
And what do you talk to us about, your decision to raise venture capital? What was your thinking? What were you driving for at that stage?
So I've always had a vision for building if we build the largest company that we can help solve the unemployment problem, the 21% unemployment of military spouse community, right? If I scale this company as large and as fast as I can scale it, I can help that many more military spouses. So that is the framework of how I was thinking about raising venture, right? How fast can I move? I know I could bootstrap this and I could continue to grow it slowly over time, but putting venture in helps speed up my timeline and helps me grow the company to where I can serve more people in the community and solve even bigger problems, right? And I knew that I had other companies like my software company and everything before, but I knew this was special and something that I really wanted to grow and scale to a much bigger level that I was going to need support and finances to do that.
And what did you learn about I guess the question is, what changed, what evolved having an investor? What's been the good, what's been the bad or maybe there's nothing bad, but the not so good sometimes. I mean, what's been the costs and benefits of having a partner?
Well, I mean, obviously, Squadra is an amazing partner. All of my investors are great. So I think I heard that advice early on to make sure, that you choose wisely, taking money. Not all money's the same. And I think that's true. And from my perspective, having the relationships with the investors, when I went to raise my Series A, I had over 80 warm introductions from investors that I had relationships with, including from the Squadra network. And that was a testament to me as the level of support and belief in me, belief in the company, belief in our mission, and having that, on a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis is very, very powerful. And it's helpful to me too, to come back like, Guy, you're a member of the board, right? So when we have board meetings, getting your feedback and getting your buy-in from things is really important to have that feedback. And then I send that information out to all the investors. And I usually have specific asks like, hey, I'm looking for an introduction here, or I'm looking for an advisor in this role. And everyone in my network really steps up to help me in that. So from a founder perspective, it feels like you have another layer underneath you, because being a founder can be very lonely, right? On a day-to-day basis, I'm pushing constantly, but I know if I need to reach out, that network is there. And I think that's important.
Let's talk a little bit about where exactly the business is right now. So you gave a little bit of some numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us what kind of companies, give us a sense of the breadth of the talent that we're deploying. These 500 employees, tell us about them, and then tell us, I know one of the things that you've done is you mentioned, you hinted at it, but we don't just place talent, outsource talent anymore. We're doing some other things as well. So walk us through the state of the company as it is today.
Sure. So like you mentioned, we have 500 employees located all across the globe. We work with companies, mostly large enterprise, but some middle market companies in mostly customer experience roles in those. What we found was a unique selling point for us in those specifics is we have US citizens located globally in every time zone that have very unique lived experiences. So they work really well with customer facing kind of roles. So anything that's project management, higher levels of support, things that take problem solvers or people to think through or to connect with other people. Military spouses just naturally do an amazing job at that. And so we work with big brands like Prudential. We work with middle market companies that are in the tech sector, a lot of fintech, a lot of insurtech, financial institutions, things that need like a US based workforce. is kind of our sweet spot in getting that outsourced talent. But we don't only just do that. We actually have the direct hire. So the direct hire product works for smaller companies as well. So if you just want to hire one spouse, you can come to Instant Teams and direct hire to your own payroll a spouse, or you can hire 10 or 20 from there as well. So we can work and flex in both ways with the types of companies that we work with. The other product that we recently launched, which is called 12 Million Plus, that's our app uniquely for military spouses. It's the only verified community. So we actually verify military spouse affiliation through ID.me partnership. And it's a safe place for military spouses to come connect with each other, get resources. There's upskilling. We have a partnership with Grow with Google, so they can take Grow with Google courses through there. They can meet friends there. They can look at our job opportunities, and we connect them with brands through that app as well. So that's really creating the momentum for the community. It's called 12 Million Plus because there's over 12 million military spouses from a veteran and active duty side. And we know right now we can't give all 12 million a job. Right. I'd love to give all 12 million a job, right? I would love to do that, but right now I can't. So what are some things we can do to serve the community while they're waiting for the job opportunities with Instant Teams, and 12 Million Plus is part of that.
Yeah, I think the story you were hinting at before, for our listeners here, I remember being really struck by Liza's passion to employ. She was hammering this into my head when we met in the first few months of getting to know the company. And I'll never forget. I mean, I have stats embedded in my brain. 1.1 million active duty military spouses, 60% have bachelor's degrees or above, 26% were unemployed, probably 50% were inefficiently employed. Right? I mean, yeah, they're employed, but we've got a spouse with a marketing degree working as a cash register, working the cash register at the PX. Yeah, they're employed, but they're not. The thing that always struck me was this idea that we're actually enabling these people through this remote work to do what they're proud of, to do what they're good at, to do what they're capable of, right? And how valuable, how valiant and virtuous of an effort that is, right? But the joke of the conversation was, so Liza's hit 26%, 26% unemployment, and you got to help, we got to solve this. I said, well, how many people do we have in the community right now actively? And I think it was something, I don't remember what it was. I want to say it was something like we had 4,000 spouses in our talent pipeline at the time. Maybe it was less, it was 2,000. And we had 40 of them employed in these positions. And I said, so we have 99% unemployment right now in our community. And Liza, I remember you laughing. I never thought
of it. It stuck with me. It stuck with me, right? As part of my driving force of how do I narrow that gap, right? Within our own organization.
Well, and it's come down right to how do we employ more at scale? That's why we do the programming that you alluded to. But it's also why we've talked so much, and Erica is now driving the community efforts, right? Around, okay, and by the way, some of the people in our community aren't ready for a job right now. They don't want a job right now. They just want to be part of the community, right? I mean, and if we can upskill them and make them better, and even if they're employed by somebody else happily, right? All those things add value in their lives. And that's again a valiant, virtuous effort. So it's been amazing. Has everything been perfect? And have you had any slips or falls along the way? And what can you share with us in terms of lessons learned on your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be authentic if I didn't say there were problems and slips and all kinds of things along the way on the entrepreneurial journey. I think one of the things that I am learning too is how to be a CEO at the different stages, right? Because my job, my role continually changes at each scale of the company and each iteration that we take 2 steps forward. And so that's been a challenge of mine to figure out when to lean in, when to lean back. And now I have a C-suite of teams. And so now I'm leading a team of really high performers, right? So where do I lean in? When do I step back? Learning those things and learning that rhythm. I think, I've had that team for about a year and a half now. I'm starting to get in a good rhythm of that, but that's a learning experience that I personally had challenges to go through. And of course, along the ways we've had to pivot and try things out, and some things we thought would work didn't work and have to turn around and start again. But I think that's all natural part of the process. And I try to be as responsive as I can to data. As an engineer, I love data. I like to see. So now we're stepping back even right now and saying, okay, the last year and a half, what have we learned? What is the data telling us on the community side that they really want? What is the data telling us on the direct hire side? And really kind of digging into that so that we make sure we're making the right decisions as we move forward.
And I just want to take the opportunity, if anybody who's listening in has a question for Liza, go ahead and throw it in the chat room, and I'm happy to ask it to her. And I have something else I'd love to ask you. You had a pretty special opportunity recently to fireside chat, be on the other side of this equation, in a room of real people with some real hitters. Tell us about that, and what you took from that experience.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to interview both Jamie Dimon and Dan D'Aniello on stage at the same time. And JP Morgan gave me that opportunity, and they had mentioned that I was going to do it before, but then about a couple of weeks before the event, they sent me an email and they said, okay, submit your questions that you want to ask Jamie. And I was like, wait, you want me to ask him questions? I thought I was going to be like on a panel with them. And they're like, no, you're running the panel. So I was like, oh, wow. I don't get super nervous, but I will say that made me nervous. And so I was going to make sure that I did a really good job. So I know you and I had a conversation kind of about how to tell the story and how to do things. And so I wrote the first iteration and I submitted it to JP Morgan. And then they came back and there's like, oh, we're going to add Dan D'Aniello to the stage too. So I was like, oh, well,
who is
the founder of the Carlyle Group.
Right.
And he also now is the IBMF lead donor for the IBMF program. So now it's called the Dan D'Aniello Institute of Veterans and Military Families. So has a big part of the military families as well. And so luckily, some of my story arc had to do with having daughters. They both only had daughters, so I could keep that story arc in. And I wrote down my questions and I practiced them like nobody's business. I recorded myself saying them. I listened to it in the airplane on the way there. I rehearsed it so many times so that my main goal was like, I'm going to get on the stage with these two billionaires that are, very well polished. I am not going to look like I don't know what I'm doing. So I practiced. And when I got up there, I will say it was so much fun. I had a blast. They were the best, so easy to interview. They were super respectful. Like the questions just flowed so nice. And so I really had a good time. And it was really an honor to be able to do something like that.
Well, that is a very special opportunity, as you know. And I take it that you believe your hard work also paid off, which is always an important lesson. Tell us, we do have a few questions, and I want to ask them to you, and then I've got one final question for you.
Okay.
But I'll save mine for the end. The first question here is, we'd love to hear a story about a specific military spouse and the impact that, I'm going to add to it, the impact that they've had. The question is the impact we've had on their career and lives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'd love you to kind of flip it the other way too. What impact have they had on the customer?
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, obviously lots of stories come to mind, but one in particular is Ariane. She works for Instant Team. She actually started on one of our customer accounts, one of our bigger accounts, Assurance, which is owned by Prudential. She was in the first round of our hires for that kind of pilot project. So they wanted to test us out, see how good we were, see how good our spouses were. on that contract, which ended up being getting extended and is one of our largest customers today. But Ariane started off on that contract. She was a relatively new military spouse at the time, but she had been moving around several times, and she had a bachelor's degree. She had experience, but she was really struggling to find a job. And we actually, there's a video highlight on her story, but she got onto that account, and then she was able to work her way from there just as a team member to a team lead, and then from a team lead to a team supervisor, and from a team supervisor, now she's the data analytics person because she actually has a background in accounting and data. And so she took that very entry level job. But as soon as we kind of got a hold of her skill sets, the customer, we were able to grow her into the data analytics role that she does now. And she's still a rock star for the company. And she talks about how much of an impact it's had on her financially for them to be able to buy their first house in Vegas. So they just moved to Vegas about a year and a half ago, and they were able to buy their first house and able to do more things with their kids as far as extracurricular activities and buy a second car because of her income, the dual income that the family now has. And so that's a proud example of the impact that we're having, and someone who, on the other flip side of that, does amazing things for Instant Teams. She's an amazing employee. She brings so much to the table. We put her in front of customers all the time. She brings the data, the analytics from the attrition rates and the retention and all of those things to our customers on those big accounts. So we're really grateful to have her and proud of the story.
Thank you for that. She, this is not, it must be something with the name Ariane.
Yeah, not the Ariane on this call.
Our Ariane, who's her equal, has an equally impressive impact on us. So I think the other lesson learned here is to hire people named Ariane. Another question: how can enterprises actually justify, a little tougher, a little technical question here, how do they actually justify social impact spend? Are there very specific metrics or proof points that we can provide on impact?
Okay. So yes, there are very specific diversity numbers. So within Instant Teams employees, that's where we provide the numbers of impact for impact sourcing. So impact sourcing is, how many diversity hires, how many women, how many people of color, underserved communities also fall under that. So the military spouse designation falls under that. And what's unique about Instant Teams is we have all that demographic data. And even if a company direct hires, they can have that data and report it. So that actually makes us stand out from like some of the nonprofits or some of the other organizations that might say that they help access the military community. We actually have the data to support it so that when they hire, they can report the data on their numbers. So that percentage of diversity hires is something that they are charged with from a company perspective. So their CEOs put out a mandate for the year of how much of their spend is allocated to diverse groups and what that breakdown looks like. And so we can fit into those plans as well. But like I mentioned at the beginning, it also has to make business sense, right? Because you can't just impact source and then not actually solve a problem. So that's where we go in with the business leaders and work with them on the different areas that they're struggling with. And then how do we solve that with military spouse talent? So we get both of those things in one bucket.
And that sort of leads into the other question from the audience here. Can you share a specific story with a customer that you're working with now who has really gotten that value from the start?
Sure. So the assurance account, which I mentioned from the very beginning, has been a huge supporter of the military spouse community and wanted that impact sourcing model, right? So we got an introduction to them through the USO because they were interested in supporting the military community. But at the same time, they need people on that account that are going to stay. And so what they found through their impact sourcing was not only could they do good by hiring from military spouses, but our attrition rates were less than 20%, where the industry is north of 30% on attrition. And so our people stayed, and they stay because they're looking for that career continuity as they move. And so our retention rates are a lot higher. So from that business perspective, it makes sense from the impact sourcing side that not only are they getting really great talent, but they're also having that impact. So hitting both of those buckets.
Okay, well, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And I'll ask it this way. Liza Marie, what do you want to be? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. Well, I think the entrepreneur is in my blood, right? And I want to be a change maker, right? And I want to be a problem solver, and I want to have an impact on this community that I have fought so hard to build the company around. So I want to continue to be, I'm proud of where we're at, continue to be myself and continue to grow this company, as fast and as large as I can.
Well, we are excited to help you in whatever way we can. And I think the best way we can do that is by bringing you some really great potential enterprise partners, leaders who appreciate this and who need access to great talent. And so in whatever way we can deliver it. So we'll be excited to be a part of that endeavor, and we'll make sure that we distribute your contact information to everyone, and we'll go from there. Is there anything else we can do for you?
I appreciate that. So yeah, please do share my contact information. If there's any customers or any potential intros, I'm happy to take them and lead down. So thank you guys for having me and letting me join today.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thanks, you too.
Bye, Liza.
Bye.